.NET 5 and Other Things with Heather Downing.
The Azure DevOps Podcast is a show for developers and DevOps professionals shipping software using Microsoft technologies. Each show brings you hard-hitting interviews with industry experts, innovating better methods, and sharing success stories. Listen on to learn how to increase quality, ship quickly, and operate well. And now your host, Jeffrey Palermo.
Welcome to the show. I'm Jeffrey Palermo, your humble host. Make sure to check out www.azuredevops.show for past episodes and show notes. And last week was a huge Microsoft Build conference. And if you haven't checked that out, make sure to look at all the sessions. There's so much recorded content. You could just, make that your new watching TV. Put aside those sitcoms and the movies and just get to watching all that content. Now, my guest today is Heather Downing, and she is curious through and through. Heather is a passionate coder and entrepreneur. She has experience working with Fortune 500 companies, building enterprise-level voice, mobile, and C#.NET applications. She focuses on external thought leadership, encouraging fellow programmers to present on topics outside of the office and in the community. She's an international technical speaker and co-host of the YouTube channel The Hello World Show, a weekly video series that interviews software masters and teaches the audience something valuable in less than 10 minutes. And she also encourages those with non-traditional backgrounds to enter the world of software development. As she changed careers at age 27 and does not have a degree, yet has built a reputation as an early adopter of new tech. She's an advocate of women in tech and part of Kansas City Women in Technology. But when not coding, Heather spends her time as a competitive equestrian and learning the art of mounted archery. Heather, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm fantastic. What a nice intro. Thank you.
Well, every word of it is 100% true. So that's awesome. But there's especially in the Kansas City area, you're well known and you do a lot of speaking, and people should look for your content from Microsoft Build. But there's a lot of people listening to the show maybe haven't been fortunate enough to learn about you. How'd you get into this field? What's your backstory?
Oh, that's always my favorite part, is to share what, sparked us into this type of industry, right? Well, I actually spent 11 years in the hospitality industry. I used to work for Disney, Marriott, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And I got really tired of telling people I'm sorry as a manager of a hotel and not being able to really fix problems all the way at like a deeper rooted corporate level. And so one day I had somebody kind of snarkily tell me, as I was just deciding to fix the computer system on my own, it's like, hey, this isn't your job. This is my job. If you want to do this, why don't you just go get a job or do school or something? And he said it so mean to me. I was like, maybe I will. And so I found a boot camp in Kansas City, and that was about 10 years ago. And I really haven't looked back since. Immediately started my way into the Microsoft world because this particular place called Centric Training has a relationship with Microsoft and a lot of their certification programs back in the day. So I was a Microsoft certified professional when I left there. That was the goal at the time. Yeah, back then for application development. And I went straight into doing SharePoint applications. Yay.
Yeah, there's a lot of those out there.
There is. And then since then, I've just kind of grown. I've always done a lot of API work. And I think what keeps me in this is that if I have an idea about how something can be done, I can just look into how I could possibly put the puzzle pieces together instead of complaining that, hey, things aren't this way. And that's also why I have so many friends in open source as well, for that same reason.
Okay. Awesome. Now, this competitive equestrian, that's a 180 from what we normally think of as tech. But how does that fit in?
You'd be surprised how much it fits in. Much like what we have to do when we learn, horses require a lot of consistent, you have to just show up every day. And over time, you may not always see how far you're coming, which is the same way I feel. I feel like every time something new comes out, like Blazor or anything else like that, I always feel overwhelmed, like, oh, there's so much more I have to learn. But horses kept me honest, and they react in the moment. There's one of those situations where I had to really find my own bravery, and I had to find my own way to get out of just sitting in front of a computer all the time. And they forced me to get stronger physically and mentally as well. So I kind of fell in love with the Arabian horse breed, and over time, I was able to show them at the U.S. Arabian Horse Championships in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. And I have a couple of top 10 horses that really blessed me over time. Yeah, I know it sounds a little strange, but I found out there's actually a lot of rancher, farmer, off-grid minded people in our industry too, that we kind of like having a little bit of the traditional past with the hope of the future in tech.
Awesome. Brian Harry, who led the VSTS and then Azure DevOps group, he took almost a full year sabbatical off of Microsoft in order to work on his farm. And now he's back at Microsoft in, I think, some artificial intelligence, super secret area that we're not supposed to talk about yet, but I'm sure he'll come out and tell us at least what he's working on. But I think that's really interesting. What have you figured out, or is it just a passion that's kind of up and coming?
My passion in tech or my passion in horses?
Bringing the two together.
What I've discovered is that, sadly, as we are going, it seems like a lot of the children that are born now are actually not exposed to livestock, to larger animals, and most of them are actually quite afraid of them. It's a shame. And because of that reason, there aren't farmers and ranchers to take the place of the ones that are there now. I know this is spoken about often when it comes to crop farming, but it also is the same for livestock, And so I found that there were inefficiencies that were within the horse industry that could really be helped financially by just smart software when it came to some of their bookkeeping, et cetera. And so I started really noticing that there was a place for both. So upcoming, like, my goal is to have my own piece of land and a farm, and to develop kind of like the smartest horse farm there is, like something that where the horses are automatically fed, kind of like what you do with a dog. Like if you have an automatic feeder in your house, except we're talking about bales of hay here. So a little bit larger mechanical stuff, but I think it's possible to make this really smart and have all this data flowing in. Oftentimes, even when it comes to like veterinary stuff, people don't keep really good records of what their horses have done or are doing to figure out why they're sick or what's going on with that. But if you have a consistent schedule of, hey, according to the sensor data, the horse actually came into the stall about this time, stayed about this long, ate about this much food, and you don't have to manually do it. It's all done automatically. Really efficient, which is something that the dairy industry has figured out, but not something that most of the horse industry has figured out. So in order to kind of keep this industry from, for lack of a better term, completely dying out over the next 20 to 30 years, I think we have to find ways of making it interesting and accessible and just more efficient to millennial and the Gen Z after us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wonder if there were these ready to go systems, if more people who obviously don't live in downtown of a city, if more people would just give it a shot, even if they're not farmers. Hey, if you have even a big backyard or a few acres, just, hey, let's get some animals going.
Oh, absolutely. I think that at the end of the day, sometimes when I'm overwhelmed by when my computer isn't working the way I want it to and everything isn't all set together, it's helpful for me to walk away and just go into the country. In fact, because I'm in Kansas City, I'm right at the border of Missouri and Kansas. And so a lot of the companies that I've worked for before had agricultural clients. And I can't tell you how many things I made that were completely without internet access. So everything was done, directly for like the semis that were going across the U.S. and still having to try to monitor what the gasoline consumption was, per mile, all these things that I think a lot of us take for granted in tech. And we forget, if you're especially in one of the larger tech cities, we kind of forget that there's all the rest of not just the U.S., but the world that doesn't have that access. And that has absolutely impacted how big my calls are if I do have a call out to an API, and how much I do more locally on a machine, which is part of why I like .NET. I don't have to worry about relying on everything coming from an internet connection. I can do things more locally, whether it's NetDuino or, like I said before, like a meta board. I think it's going to have even more of a resurgence as we look into traveling outside of our, immediate galaxy here too, because we're not going to be able to, send something and wait, 15 to 20 minutes to get a response from a server back on Earth. We're going to have to think about how to make things a little bit more isolated and work efficiently.
So that sounds like a great segue into one of your .NET 5 projects.
Yes. Yep. So part of this whole smart farm idea is that I, right now, am a solo homesteader in my brain. Like, again, this is coming probably in the next year or two, and I'm planning it out. So because it's just me, it's really important that I have enough hours in the day to be able to do what I do for tech, but also handle the animals. So things that are repetitious tasks, it really bothered me that so much of it is still manual. So I was looking into a way to still monitor my animals at all times without buying one of the like the nests, that you have that you can monitor different places. We're
security
talking
cameras.
All these security cameras, absolutely. For example, there's just even 40 minutes outside of Kansas City, you only have satellite or maybe like a T-Mobile hotspot. You don't have any DSL, no cable. So taking up bandwidth just to keep cameras connected doesn't make any sense. So I was interested in figuring out, how can I create an application that's more localized within the barn that just will do kind of like a completely closed, loop system locally.
Yeah.
And I can put up my own Wi-Fi that's just local, because otherwise I wouldn't get signal everywhere. And this way I can put up repeaters just for a localized Wi-Fi network. And something that I can monitor. All I need is the actual feed from the cameras. And then I can go from there deciding, hey, based on when an animal moves, I want to read that sensor and then go ahead and turn on the camera. I don't necessarily need it on all the time. I just only want it when they decide to take a drink or when they decide something, so that I actually have timestamps of when that mare who is pregnant, how often she's drinking. If she hasn't been drinking all day, I can set up my own kind of rules around, if, this horse hasn't been over here, like in this amount of time, then just notify me that, hey, there might be a problem, even if I'm not looking 100% of the time at the camera all day. It gives me much more intelligent data, and I think I can do it for pretty inexpensively. Now, there are definitely already created software solutions out there, but they're mainly for these enormous dairy farms or something like that. It doesn't really work for somebody who has a hobby farm. It's definitely not cost effective, and they all use internet. And I want to try to just do it only like local Wi-Fi within my own area that I can set up pretty quick.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, I can see. What kind of camera specs are you thinking? There's got to be commodity cameras, right? That just have an easy API?
There are a few, absolutely, that just all I really need. I mean, at the end of the day, if you get a really fancy camera, it's going to want to try to connect to the internet automatically for you, and I don't want it to do this.
Yeah.
To give you some backstory, like, you don't need anything fancy. In fact, the less fancy, the better. When I probably had like my third job, I interfaced with a zebra printer. Do you know what those are?
Just from reading about them, I've never used one.
Zebra printer are the kinds of printers that are used to print labels that you can then automatically on an assembly line slap on a box. Think about how that would be done, like for Amazon.
Oh yeah, the barcode, the label printers.
Yes, the label printers. So when I was interfacing with that, freaked me out. I'd never done anything with like a piece of hardware before, and it turned out it was pretty simple. It was like just a 0-1. Okay, it was either the eye was open or the eye was closed, and while it was open, you could say, okay, while it's open, make sure it scans it and then stops reading it. It's the same thing for cameras. You can actually do that kind of a thing with a camera feed. It doesn't need to be, it's not as fancy as some of the wrapped APIs that we have that you would call with JSON, but these are just base level signals that you can use. It's actually much better for something that you're not trying to use the internet for. You're trying to do something on a local level. So you can use anything. Actually, for this experiment, I was looking at just using like an old GoPro at first, and then I just hated trying to interface with it because it's very proprietary. So there's a bunch that are like less than $30 on Amazon that you can get that are battery operated. They're not even connected to power. They can run on their own, and they run for like 250 days without, if you wanted to leave it on the whole time. And of course, there are also motion detection cameras that are smarter that you can use for that. But because I want to control where the motion is coming from because of the height of the animals, and maybe if it's around a corner, I don't want the camera to decide that. I want the sensor to decide that. So I decided to decouple them for that. Okay. And it's pretty simple when it comes to that. The reason I'm using .NET 5 is because everyone should start looking at using .NET 5. I know it's not coming out officially until November, but I'm so happy I'm so happy that we're finally moving to somewhat of a unified, at least label going forward for that. So that's my project to kind of test out on one of my friends' farms here before I go and buy mine, just to see how it works. And I thought it would make a cool YouTube video and a blog post later. It's like, this is what you can do if you are a little concerned about security, but also just the monitoring of animals you care about. I think this might be fun to do regardless of where you live.
Well, whatever you figure out, I'll adopt, because we dabble around with animals just living kind of about an hour west of Austin. We cows, donkeys. We've had a few crops of chickens.
Oh wow!
So, yeah, you get something figured out. I'll be one of your pilot cases for sure.
Oh, I would love that. Yes, it's interesting because as a developer, you get very frustrated very easily that there isn't already a solution that you think logically should exist out there, right?
Yeah, surely somebody else has done that.
They have, but it's scaled up. So imagine somebody saying, hey, we've built this amazing identity solution, for people who have millions of users. And as somebody who you're kind of near Austin, so the startup scene is strong there. You're like, look, I just want to get something up to start an idea of what I have for an application or a startup. I don't need that big thing. And in fact, it doesn't make any sense for me to set up. It's very complicated. And I was like, well, all of the individual consumer options seem to be completely driven by an internet connection and Wi-Fi. And it frustrated me. I was like, well, bandwidth is precious, especially if you want to use most of it as someone in tech for your job. So you don't want everything else being noisy and taking up space and throttling it when it doesn't need to, but you also don't want to give up the security of what's going on. So that's kind of where this came from. And that's phase one. So phase two is, I know it will work because I've done sensor stuff before. If anybody's done anything with a garage door opener, it's very similar. Just garage door opener and a camera feed, and then you write the application that determines the rules, which will be configurable, about how often or when to log data, when not to. That seems to be pretty straightforward, right? Well, the phase two has to do with security of the network if I'm gone. So let's say I want to know what's going on over there if I'm not home. At that point in time, I could open up, if I have like a localized server, which I would, just like a local computer that's running this, then I can go ahead and connect it to whatever my home internet would be, and then I would authenticate in there. Now, naturally, because I work for Okta, I would want to use Okta's platform because it takes very little time to set up for me to do something like that, and that way I could secure that external door into what I'm trying to look at from my home, like animal monitoring network.
Now, you working on this from a product perspective, or is there a open source Git repository that you
likely
shared?
It'll be all open source. Like I'm not interested in putting something out for profit. I think that there are definitely venture capitalists that are stronger backed than me to make something like that happen. And it becomes like a full-time job to try to do that. Part of my entrepreneurship is I used to do something, I actually won second place in a hackathon for a concept called Equismart. And it was about it was the ability for someone to walk down a line of stalls with an iPad and just, without them having to think about or know, what each horse's special needs were, if they were coming in and going out, kind of like a horse motel. It already had it preloaded in there for them, exactly what they needed, if they needed to be turned out or not, instead of the way that we've been doing it, which is pulling it up on a notes app or whatever. It's automatically updated. And then anytime a horse was fed or whatever they got done with, whether it was being worked by their trainer, they would just use the app and say, okay, it's done. And so as the owner, you could just log in and see, oh, my horse has worked at 3:30 p.m. today. And you don't have to have a conversation back and forth over phone call or text. It just shows you that data. And I was blown away that at least not on the scale that I've noticed here, and definitely not in the Arabian horse industry. There isn't anything that anybody's using, even at the pro horse barns, that is like that. That is like that. And I was like, oh, so that was like my concept. And of course, like all wonderful ideas, they only a very small percentage of them actually continue on. But it was a neat concept to kind of marry, the kinds of things that you would do outside of a building with what we do in tech. And I think so often we target people in a certain demographic that have an iPhone or that have a certain level of internet that is just not the rest of the world. And traveling internationally to speak definitely taught me a lot about that. Yeah.
You can have a supercomputer in your pocket, but if it's worthless, if it's not connected, that doesn't help us. And so, well, this time, there's you've also been speaking about the developers that are now out of work and a little bit job shrinkage and the concept of retooling. What have you found out?
Well, I can tell you, as somebody who was pretty gung-ho at one point in time about VR, that you can pick something that
virtual reality.
Yes, the virtual reality. It may not go in the direction you think. In terms of when I did it, it was like 10 years too early. Of course, now it's finally picked up. I mean, I own an Oculus Quest, and everybody should own something like that to play Beat Saber or just kind of see how far the graphics and the immersion experiences come with Unity.
Oculus, those are like these headsets that you put on that kind of put you in the Star Trek holodeck, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I've used the HoloLens as well, but that's much more mixed reality where you'd actually get to see outside of it. There is something to be said for the immersion, especially right now when some people can't leave where they are. It was really helpful. I mean, I went from never really playing games because I didn't grow up with that to now I'm at expert plus level on Beat Saber within 2 months because I've been playing this game and it's physical. The reason that I think now is a good time to take a look at what it takes to work in that industry and just play around with Unity is because the gaming companies, but also the larger companies that are going to think about CAD drawings and things like that being able to be realized are going to start hiring more and more because it has proven now that the audience is there. And with the addition of Facebook creating their hardware at an affordable price point finally, I mean, the Oculus Quest is like $380 and it has no wires. I could take it with me in a field somewhere and play it. And that's amazing, right? And so that means something that you can really mess around with. Before, you had to have thousands of dollars worth of equipment and a strong enough PC that could do it. And there are still those options, but I'm starting to see the corner being turned. And I mean, this is going to be embraced by the real estate industry. This is going to be embraced by the sports industry, especially. I know for me, if the HoloLens got to an affordable price point, I would purchase it specifically so I could practice archery with it, so that it would analyze where my arrows are coming from and give me suggestions on which way to tip it, as I'm going, because I'm able to see through it, so to speak, and, to the outside world. And it could do that. Imagine what that does for your golf swing. All these things are finally now much more practical. And before they just sounded fun, but now companies are going to be like, well, the millennials have embraced it, and actually much of the Gen Xers have started to as well. So I guess now's the time for us to look into how that can help us look not just different, but just look like we're forward thinking. That we thought that was what's going to happen 10 years ago. Turns out financial crisis happened 10 years ago or so, and that wasn't the time. And then now the headsets themselves are just so much cheaper. It's going to be something that you should just add to your toolbox. Plus, it's really fun if you can get your hands on one. That's just one aspect.
Now, just as an aside, does it matter if you go with the 64 gig or the 128?
No.
No, it doesn't matter. Okay.
It depends on how much you want to save. Like, I have a bunch of songs that I side-loaded because I'm a developer. I'm not afraid of putting it into developer mode and side-loading songs on my Beat Saver. That's really all it is. And you can clear those out, and that's fine.
Okay. All right. So no need for that storage. Because, we're always thinking, oh, shoot, am I going to regret this? This is 300. Yeah, the 128 gig is up to, $500, and the 64 gig is $400 right now. So, it's a big difference.
Yeah, but it's still cheaper than looking at the old Rift back in the day.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And then you don't need a computer. It's built in. That's part of why I loved the HoloLens when it came out, is the computers in the headset. Now, it does make it heavier, but that's definitely something I enjoy looking at. And that's also more fun. It makes us feel like the future's still possible in any sort of a logical way when it comes to jobs. I mean, that's really something that surprised me, is that right now, if you do any sort of game development, you are a hot commodity for recruiters, because they're trying to find devs who understand that. And C# developers have that option with Unity. So we should definitely look at it, because our medium for a long time has been the web. But it's not going to be forever. I learned, of course, with mobile, we learned that too, right? It's going to be the same. It's just going to be another device, but of course you have to understand it, right? You can't just go from one and take the scenarios and apply it to the new medium. You have to take a look at what that means. So I definitely think that that's something that we can easily add, because we already know the language itself. We just need to understand the scope that we would be dealing with.
Right. Now, you said something that's intriguing. You said the web isn't, I'm not sure what you said. It's not going to be. And earlier, you just name dropped. We didn't go into it. You name dropped at the beginning of the show, Blazor. Does that have, what is your thinking there? You got to tell us.
Oh, am I thinking about the future?
The future of the web, and I can't ignore that you name dropped Blazor.
Not at all. First of all, I'm so excited about Blazor. When I started .NET, I started web forms. So to me, this is like the cousin later on down the line. And it is very similar for the same reasons. It's very compelling to a company if they can have a developer that can do, soup to nuts, back to front end. It does take a certain kind of person to be able to understand where to focus the right solution. But I think that it will make sense, especially going forward, for some of the shrinkage that we will see in our industry, because every company is a technology company right now. So we will naturally see like our clients who happen to be hit hard, that maybe in, certain industries that were hit harder than tech, they're still our clients, and they're just not gonna be able to pay, or they'll go under. And that's something that will affect us. So just looking ahead a little bit, if you understand how to use something like Blazor, you can be immediately employable to do something if they're trying to shrink their team. That's what I am excited about with that. But when it comes with the future, like beyond us going forward past this pandemic, I think that it's been proven that entertainment needs to be part of human civilization. And I don't think video games will ever go away. But not just that, is that a bunch of us who grew up with video games will now understand how to use an immersive style of communication, whether that is, having a meeting over virtual reality or whatever. I think it'll just feel normal, honestly, going forward in the next 10 years, 20 years, to use it all the time. And that's what I meant. I meant that people aren't going to be like, hold on, let me pull things up on my desktop or pull things up on my phone. I think immersion is going to be part of our future. And part of that immersion is the use of a different technology besides the web as we know it now. I think we'll probably think of it as an extension because the device is different. But I'm saying that I don't think it's all about doing everything in HTML and CSS. I think it's going to be still very back-end driven in many ways, but visualized.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious to know what you've been thinking. We're recording this podcast. We're doing a video conference. We're seeing each other, even though it's an audio podcast. But then we're talking about these VR headsets that are immersive. How is this going to change the dynamic of working in a team? Is it possible that we'll, maybe be in different places, but we have this headset on and then it simulates us being in the room together?
Those already exist. So even
well, tell which one do I buy?
Right. Well, it depends on which platform you use, of course. I'm speaking to one that I know is affordable in terms of the headset and has its own ecosystem, but there's also open source options as well. So in the Oculus ecosystem, there's a bunch of things you can get on Steam VR. So Steam VR is similar to how you would use Steam for other kinds of video games, except it's all virtual reality based. And there are several that give you an avatar and it'll let you be literally in some sort of rec room. It's called Rec Room. It's just fun to go around. But there's also other ones that are coming out, it feels like every month, that will allow you to customize to your face, or it allows you to just look like you. Do you remember the robots that people would have on wheels going around their offices with an iPad on it? Going around that we thought was really weird and creepy. It's not so weird and creepy if everybody looks like that and it's in a space like that and you just kind of move or go wherever you need to. But as the hand tracking, basically body tracking, gets better, it's already starting to, because of these games like Beat Saber, etc. That's how it's able to track how you're swiping and how quickly you're moving, where in the space you are. It'll be able to do that eventually with most of your body. So you'd be able to go into a space and walk over and whiteboard, if you will, just in the air, to show people what you're talking about and have it not just be a flat two-dimensional. It would be something where they could walk around the other side, kind of look at what you're doing as if you were in the same room. I know that this all hinges on somebody having the idea, but those ideas are already starting. There's a lot of that going on right now, not just in Silicon Valley, but other places as well, saying, well, if we can't leave because of travel, or let's say we have just financial reasons we can't travel on a plane, can we still feel like we can, in essence, have that kind of immersion that makes sense? Obviously, we all know we're wearing a headset, so there's no need to be really creepy about making it look identical to a human. You can be like, hey, this is my avatar, this is what I'm doing. And people who are in the VR space now have already embraced this. Me coming into it, I felt like I was coming in much later, like a grandmother who's like, I've never played a game before, but what are y'all doing? And so, but they've already embraced this in terms of just that in community in general. And it isn't as strange anymore as it was in the beginning. It's so amazing to me. Imagine playing Sim Farm or Sim City, something, or The Sims, where you could actually kind of look at what it would be like in different angles. We already have Google Earth now. It's not really very different than that, except you could turn your head 360 degrees around and see something around you. It could also track your movement if you decide to take a few steps forward. And I thought there's no way without an elaborate setup this would be able to work. Because remember, I'm into sensors, right? I know that the original way that a lot of the VR headsets were set up is that there were these, you'd have to mount sensors essentially kind of up high to kind of view where you are. But I just used the Oculus Quest with just 2 controllers, and I was able to walk around the area behind me here. I know you can't really see this on the podcast itself, but I was able to walk around my entire living room. It could map it, the floor, the ceiling, everything to the side, and it was able to shrink or expand the world that I then get immersed in accordingly. So everything I do feels natural.
Oh, wow. Okay. So what I think I'm hearing is it's coming soon. That there's not a product right now I should be buying for the virtual development war room, but that it's coming sooner than we think.
Oh, I think you should learn Unity right away. I think that's right now. It's there. So play around with Unity and create something like a paintbrush app where you can like change colors and paint like a virtual whiteboard. Like that's an easy one because there are some APIs already available to you that have to do with, specific shapes that you can start making. Also, spend some time with the industry that really is always in demand when it comes to asset creation. So think about it this way. I recently spoke with a friend of mine from Australia who is brilliant at CSS. She's the one who can paint any website, fantastic, like really good. When it comes to not just the gaming world, but I'm just going to call it like immersive application world, there is a big need for what those creative assets look like. And it's still technical to create them. So if you really enjoy stuff on the front end that you're doing with Blazor and you really like and you have opinions about look and feel, think about asset creation as well, because that's something that you could just do a gig on Fiverr or something like that. So when somebody needs, hey, I just need a design made like this so I can use it in my VR game or application or whatever. A lot more of the practical apps are starting to really get pumped into the system. And look at Steam VR and just see what's there. Everything is kind of divided into gaming and like to-do apps and stuff like that you can use in this space. So that's another area. If you have a slight creative bend and you have an opinion about the way something should look, consider asset creation as well. It is still technical, and it's something that I've started doing as well, and it can take off pretty quick if you're interested in a side gig.
Awesome. Well, as we close up here, people are listening to this, it's right after the Build conference. How should they search for your content from Build? What should they be looking for?
Well, at Build, I'm going to be part of the U.S. community session. I talked a little bit about Dev Around the Sun, which was the 24-hour conference fundraiser to benefit Direct Relief's COVID-19 Victim Fund. So I did that along with a lot of members of the .NET Foundation. So definitely look up that. And I'm always available on Twitter. So Coraline, I know it sounds a little strange to say out loud. It's QUORRALYNE. It's a little bit of two things. I really loved Tron Legacy. Cora was my favorite character, and I'm a big Tim Burton film fan, so Coraline was also a film I enjoyed, and that's kind of where my handle came from. So if you search me out on YouTube or Twitter and GitHub, you'll definitely find me there, or on the Okta developer channel. I teach specifically how to do security-based stuff with .NET on Okta's channel.
Nice. All right. Well, thanks so much, Heather, for being with me. This is a fascinating conversation.
Absolutely. Here. Thank you so much.
And until next time, keep shipping.
You've been listening to the Azure DevOps Podcast, a show for developers and DevOps professionals shipping software using Microsoft technologies. Go to www.azuredevops.show for show notes and other episodes. On behalf of your host, Jeffrey Palermo, and our sponsors, thanks for listening, and may God bless you.